Greenock is a town on the south bank of the Firth of Clyde in Inverclyde, Scotland, situated approximately 25 miles west of Glasgow. It is a working-class town with deep roots, shaped for generations by shipbuilding, sugar refining, and the industries that lined its waterfront. The Clyde runs wide and grey at its edge, and the hills rise steeply behind the terraced streets that climb back from the river. It is a tight community. People know each other. They know each other's families. They know the streets and the lanes and the blocks of flats where the same families have lived for decades. Greenock in the 1980s was a town going through difficulty. The industries that had sustained it for a century were in decline. Unemployment was high, and the community was drawing together in the way that close communities do when times are hard. It was in this town, in a block of flats on a street in the centre of Greenock, that Elaine Doyle grew up. Elaine Doyle was 16 years old in the summer of 1986. She lived with her parents, Maureen and Jack, and her older brother John at their home in Greenock. Her father, Jack, was a postman, a familiar, dependable presence in the neighbourhood, a man who knew his community and was known in return. Elaine worked during the week as a jewellery shop assistant in Greenock town centre. At weekends, she lived the way most 16-year-olds did, spending time with a large group of friends, going out, enjoying herself. She had recently been to her first ever disco. She was, by every account of those who knew her, a lively and sociable young woman who was beginning to find her way in the world. Her brother John described her with the particular affection of an older sibling as annoying, but in a cute way. In the weeks before her death, John had noticed that they were drifting slightly apart in the way that brothers and sisters do at that age. She was going her way and he was going his. They were a normal family. They were ordinary people. There was nothing about their lives on that street in Greenock that set them apart from any other family in the neighbourhood. On the evening of Sunday, 1st June 1986, Elaine was excited. It was the first day of the 1986 Mexico World Cup, and the town was buzzing. Elaine had finished work and was getting ready to go out with a group of friends. She was heading to the Celtic Supporters Club on Laird Street for a disco. Before she left the house, her mother Maureen asked her what time she would be home. Elaine said she would be back around 1 o'clock in the morning. Her father Jack said goodbye to her as she went out the door. The night was a good one. Elaine spent much of the evening on the dance floor with her friends. At the end of the night, she left the club with her best friend, Lynn McCurdy. The two girls walked together to a hamburger stall in Greenock town centre. They ate together, talked, and then prepared to go their separate ways. They lived in opposite directions from each other. Lynn said goodbye. She said, "See you tomorrow." Elaine said goodbye and turned toward home. It was around midnight. A witness named Martin Brown, who had been visiting his parents in Greenock that weekend, was in the area just after midnight. He later told police he had seen a man with staring, angry eyes following a girl near the street where the Doyle family lived. He noticed the man appeared to be walking faster, as if trying to catch up with her. At the time, he thought nothing serious of it. The following day, he saw the news. He went immediately to the police caravan near the scene. Elaine Doyle did not come home. On the morning of Monday, 2nd June 1986, a member of the public contacted police. A retired police officer named Alan Stewart was the first officer to arrive at the scene. He found Elaine in a lane beside an Air Training Corps hut, less than 50 yards from her family home. She was naked. Her clothing was lying around her. She had been strangled with a ligature. Her handbag and its contents were scattered nearby. She had not made it home. She had been murdered yards from her own front door. Maureen Doyle heard a knock at the door that morning. She opened it to find 2 police officers standing there. Before they could speak, she told them that her daughter had not come home the previous night and asked them if their presence had anything to do with her daughter. It did. The charge against the man who would eventually be convicted of her murder set out what had been done to Elaine in that lane. He had seized her by the hair and struck her on the head. He had either removed her clothing or compelled her to remove it herself. He had forced her to the ground, pushed her face into the ground, and sat or knelt on her. He had placed a ligature around her neck and strangled her. He had then stolen her handbag. Strathclyde police launched a major investigation. Thousands of witness statements were taken. A police artist produced a sketch of a man with distinctive ginger hair who had been seen acting suspiciously in a stairwell near the scene on the night of the murder. Door-to-door inquiries covered the surrounding streets. Officers interviewed friends, neighbours, and everyone who had been at the Celtic Supporters Club that evening. Among the statements gathered in the early days of the investigation was one from a friend of a young local man named John Docherty. The friend told police that Docherty had been at the disco on the night Elaine died. An officer made a note in the file. The note read that John Docherty should be tracked down, interviewed, and eliminated from the inquiry. The note was overlooked. John Docherty was never interviewed. The investigation continued without him. Despite the scale of the inquiry, no arrest was made. No one was charged. The case went cold. Elaine's father, Jack Doyle, did not accept that. He campaigned relentlessly for justice for his daughter for over 25 years. He spoke to journalists. He cooperated with documentary makers. He made public appeals. On 2nd June 2011, the 25th anniversary of Elaine's murder, Jack made a televised appeal, asking anyone with information to come forward. He was an old man by then, but the determination in him had never diminished. He wanted answers. He wanted someone held to account for what had been done to his daughter in that lane, 50 yards from his front door. Jack Doyle died without ever knowing who killed Elaine. Before the case was resolved, Jack himself was murdered in Greenock. A man named Stephen McIntyre was convicted of his murder and sentenced to a minimum of 15 years in prison. The Doyle family had suffered more than most families could bear. In 2011, Strathclyde police launched a fresh appeal into Elaine's murder. A reconstruction of her last movements was broadcast on BBC Crime Watch. The Crown Office Cold Case Unit, a dedicated team set up to review Scotland's oldest unsolved murders, took on the case in 2012. Investigators went back through every piece of evidence gathered since 1986. They re-examined witness statements. They looked again at the forensic evidence. And they discovered something that had been sitting in the file for 26 years. The overlooked note about John Docherty. DNA samples had been captured on tape applied to Elaine's body at the scene on the morning of 2nd June 1986. The samples had been preserved for over 2 decades. When the cold case team located John Docherty, now living in Greenock and working as a bus driver for Inverclyde Council, they asked him to provide a DNA sample voluntarily. He agreed. He gave the sample. When the result came back, Docherty's DNA matched the samples taken from Elaine's chest and face. By all accounts, Docherty appeared absolutely shocked when he was told the DNA matched. On 22nd March 2013, police carried out a dawn raid on his home. John Doherty was arrested and taken into custody. He was 48 years old. He had been 21 years old on the night Elaine Doyle was murdered. He had been in the same class at school as Elaine's brother, John. He had no criminal record, not before the murder and not in the 27 years since. After leaving school, he had worked as a labourer before joining the army in 1988, where he served for 6 years. He had gone about his life in plain sight in Greenock for nearly 3 decades. When police interviewed him on video after his arrest, Doherty was asked what he knew about the Elaine Doyle case. He replied, "Nothing, other than what I have read. She was a young lassie on a night out and she didn't make it home." He told detectives that on the night of the murder, he had been at home with his parents in Greenock. His parents were no longer alive. The trial of John Doherty began on 25th March 2014 at the High Court in Edinburgh. It was a landmark moment in Scottish legal history, the first case ever to come to trial following an investigation by the Crown Office's Cold Case Unit. The judge was Lord Stewart. The prosecution was led by Advocate Depute John Scullion. The defence was led by Donald Findlay QC. The jury consisted of 8 women and 7 men. The trial lasted more than 10 weeks and heard 50 days of evidence. Doherty denied murder. He lodged special defences of alibi and incrimination. During the trial, he admitted something he had not told police in his initial interviews. He'd been at the disco on the night Elaine died. He had lied about that. His defense team lodged a list of 41 other possible suspects, drawn from the names on the original police files. One by one, witnesses were called. One by one, they denied any involvement. The defense's argument was that the killer could be any one of those 41 men, that the DNA evidence alone was not sufficient to convict beyond reasonable doubt. The prosecution's case was built on the DNA. The samples taken from Elaine's body in 1986 had been carefully preserved. The match to Doherty was precise. Alongside the DNA, the jury heard from Martin Brown, the witness who had seen a man with staring, angry eyes following a girl near the Doyle family home just after midnight on the night of the murder. They heard from Lynn McCurdy, Elaine's best friend, who described their last evening together and the moment they said goodbye. They heard from Elaine's brother John, who described waking up that morning to find 2 police officers in the house and his mother running about in distress. On 17th June 2014, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. John Doherty showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read. His defense counsel, Donald Findlay, said his client was adamant he was the victim of a miscarriage of justice and intended to keep fighting. On 5th August 2014, John Doherty was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. He appealed against both his conviction and his sentence. Both appeals were rejected. Maureen Doyle spoke after the verdict. She said the result did not make their day-to-day living any easier. She said the pain does not go away. But she said that she and her son John took comfort that they now had justice for Elaine, which was all they, and especially her father Jack, had ever campaigned for. She thanked the people of Inverclyde for living the nightmare with them for 28 years and never withdrawing their support. Detective Superintendent Bobby Hendren, who had led the cold case review, said he hoped the verdict gave the family some comfort. Hello everyone, thank you for listening and drop any feedback below. I would love to hear your thoughts and hope to see you again right here on Cold Case UK.